Hey, I'm Ivan and I'm building a brand to serve spearos. And as I mentioned in the last video, I'm starting with a filleting knife. So the first step was coming up with a concept of what I'm trying to do and some hypotheses of what would make spearos want to have this knife. And with those in hand, I went ahead and created a survey to validate or invalidate those hypotheses, and I sent it out to some of my spearfishing friends and asked for feedback. Now, these were the questions. One, the size of the filleting knife. I offered a few options, along with free-form response here in case people preferred something other than the common sizes. The next one was how stiff should the blade be, whether they care if the knife is made of natural materials or not, other knife properties that are generally at odds with each other, and I'll talk about this more, but this is about steel properties, and then finally anything else they'd like to add. Now, I've got 20 responses, and some of them were quite surprising. So first, the knife size was the least clear one, but this is because I included a free-form text option. So when everything is taken into account and responses that people gave, the most popular size really is 6 inches. This will be affected by where the spearos live and the size of the fish available to them, but I think 6 inches is a good size to start for most. The next question was regarding the stiffness of the blade. So here, the preference was much clearer, with over half of the people preferring a stiffer blade with only some flexibility. And this is very interesting because if you look at filleting knives available in the market, they are all on the very flexible side. Okay, the next was about how much they care whether the knife was made out of natural materials. And this one was maybe the most surprising answers to me personally. In general, it turns out that people don't really care all that much and just want the materials to be of high quality. So next we come to the steel properties. They very strongly prefer a knife that holds the edge well. So that's the majority, like for the majority of people, that's the preference. Even though fish is comparatively soft, poor quality knives go blunt quickly and require frequent sharpening. So that's important. Next one was rust resistance. And then finally, the last one was how easy it was to sharpen. And then the final question was to write in their own words if there were any other particular pain points or things they'd like to see in the knife. So without reading all the answers, here's the summary. This is in no particular order. One, they want ergonomic and textured handle that ensures comfortable and secure grip even when the knife is wet. Number two is it needs to have rust-resistant quality steel that maintains a sharp edge and is easy to sharpen. Now, as I'll talk about later, these properties are generally at odds with each other. You can't get all of them to be perfect, so it's a matter of like what's the preference. The next one was blade flexibility options. So some people prefer to have more flexible knives for smaller fish and stiffer knives for larger fish. They also expressed the desire to have some kind of sheath for protection and for easy drying. And then finally, there was a suggestion to have some variety in knife types. So this was to offer a set of knives for different filleting needs. And so from the above, one thing is clear. It's impossible to create a knife or even a set of knives that will be perfect for everyone. And that's fine. There are no products that fit everyone. So we all have our preferences, but I do think I've got a feeling for what the strongest preferences are and what most people consider useful or on the other hand, undesirable. Now, with the above, I went and did a lot of research into how knives are made, different materials that are used, and try to get the properties that we're after. And this was such an interesting journey to learn all of this. I had no idea how complex the world of knife making is, and it's super fascinating. So the most important and most complex thing to discuss is the blade steel. There were many surprising things I found about this. So for example, did you know that specific types of steel are trademarked or branded? I had no idea. So like only a particular company can make that particular steel. I thought steel was just, numbered and, had a composition to it and that was it. Well, then the next question is, what exactly makes a steel? And there's a lot that goes into it. First, there is the chemical composition where different chemical elements are added to iron to kind of shape the steel properties. And this is typically public and can be analyzed. But recreating that type of steel can be proprietary technology. But aside from just chemical composition, steel properties are largely influenced by the manufacturing process. So heating, cooling, forging or casting, quenching, tempering, A lot goes into it, and even chemically identical steel can have varying properties depending on how it's made. And generally, we're talking about these steel properties when it comes to knives. One is edge retention, the second is rust resistance, and the third is toughness, or how resistant it is to chipping and shattering. And because of the way how these are achieved, they're generally at odds with each other. So for example, adding carbon makes the steel harder, so it holds the edge well, but it makes it less tough and more brittle. Adding chromium makes it more rust resistant, but it also makes it softer. So the science of steelmaking is in increasing all these properties together and achieving specific balance. And the steel I'm after holds the edge well and is very rust resistant. And so after reviewing properties of about, I don't know, a couple of dozen types of steels, I've narrowed it down to two. The first one is commonly called VG10. Now, as I said, steel names are trademarked, so VG10 is the trademark of a Japanese company. Now, unfortunately, this particular brand is very difficult to obtain outside of Japan, so a steel of the same composition but different name would be used, although some manufacturer will still call it VG10, even though technically that's incorrect. This steel is famous for its edge retention and being very rust resistant. So it's also a very hard steel and it's not very tough. So in other words, it's a little brittle. And I'm worried a little about chipping. So it also requires a harder honing rod as it's too hard to be honed with a standard carbon steel rod. Now, VG10 is also produced as layered steel, so you can get these gorgeous patterns in the blade, which is often called Damascus steel. The other steel I've landed on is Swedish. It comes from Sandvik, and the name is 14C28N. And this one can be had directly from Sweden, and it also has an amazing combination of properties. So while not quite as hard as VG10, it is even more rust resistant, and it still holds the edge very, very well. So it's easier to sharpen, so we could go with a steel honing rod or some of the other coated ones. It's a very popular steel for high-end kitchen knives. I really like the properties of this one, and I think it seems very promising. So in the end, I think I just need to test both. Test the sharpness, how easy they are to sharpen, how well different rods work on them, and how long it keeps the edge, and then put the corrosion resistance under stress as well. So aside from the steel, we've got handles, and they come in a bit fewer varieties, but they all still have trade-offs. Now, I originally wanted natural wood, but all manufacturers I spoke to strongly advised against it. This is because wood moves, it shrinks, and it can crack. For high-end kitchen knives that you use carefully only in the kitchen, that will be very well taken care of, this is acceptable. If you leave your knife wet, if you don't oil it, or if you leave it in the sun, then the handle will probably soon deform and potentially crack. And this is not ideal, and I'd really want these knives to be like used, not just looked at. Now, some types of wood are more resistant than others, but the most stable woods like ebony or kachaka are just not available with FSC, and FSC is a sustainable forestry certification. And that's just a big no for me. I certainly don't want to be contributing to deforestation of native forests in West Africa or Central America. And so, aside from a couple of options for wood, we also have two main alternatives. The first one is a composite wood called paca. This is wood dust and resin, where the wood can be FSC certified, and the finished pattern looks very much like natural wood. So it's got grain, it's got rings and everything. Now, because of the resin, the handle is stable and it won't easily deform. And then the other option is called G10, and this is a composite of fiberglass and resin. It's completely stable, it won't deform, and it can be made in different patterns as well. It's a common material for field knives because of its durability at a slightly higher price. Now, grip is also important, and this one is hard to gauge before you have the handle in your hand. So I'm getting the samples for different materials, and we'll just see how that goes. And then finally, we've got the canvas roll. So this is something I'm still playing with. As with other things, my original idea of using 100% cotton, which would be waxed, turned out to not be that great. Because cotton is soft, it will damage more easily, especially with knives, and is prone to mold. A more likely material is going to be some combination of cotton and polyester, or even 100% polyester. again, it's something to test. I wouldn't go with leather because leather doesn't mix well with moisture, and it molds very easily. And so these are the basic components. With this, the next step is talking to manufacturers and getting some samples developed. So that's coming next. If you haven't, please subscribe and follow along as we bring this to life. Thank you for watching.